We're going to talk about a potential trade with the Brooklyn Nets for forward Cam Johnson on today's show. Someone that we have not mentioned as a trade target for the Miami Heat in the past, but Bleacher Report named him as one, so I wanted to talk about it. This is the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and I do find it interesting because when I saw this article from Bleacher Report labeling 3 trade targets for the Miami Heat, I expected it to be the big 3 that always gets mentioned around Miami this year. Trae Young, Brandon Ingram, and Kyle Kuzma. Now, they did go 2 for 3 with Trae Young and Kyle Kuzma being on the list, but Cam Johnson was that third name that actually intrigued me because he provides a lot of the same skill sets that a man the Heat already have on their roster, Duncan Robinson, does. And before we get into the nits and bolts and whatever about Cam Johnson, let me know. Does he intrigue you? Is he someone that you see on this thumbnail, this title, and be like, I haven't thought about Cam Johnson before, but maybe I should have. Let me know if he intrigues you down in the comment section. Here is what Bleacher Report said on the Nets forward. The Heat finished 19th and made threes last season, 12.5 per game, an area that Johnson would help improve. The 28-year-old owns a career mark of 39.2% from deep on a healthy 5.7 attempts per game, and like Kyle Kuzma, also a trade target that they mentioned, he's versatile enough at 6'8 to play both forward positions. And in a vacuum, I do like Cam Johnson. I think he's a good basketball player. He's an excellent three-point shooter, and he's got some versatility to him on the defensive side of the floor. The question is, does he provide enough for you at his contract, which will flash later on in the episode, to make it worth someone the Heat actually would go out and acquire? I'm not so sure that's the case. Him and Mikal Bridges were part of that headlining package that sent Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns, and then obviously Mikal, Cam, and a bunch of picks heading to Brooklyn. And that year that Cam Johnson got traded to Brooklyn was his best season, 22-23, when he averaged a career-high 15.5 points per game and shot incredibly efficient from the field, 40% from 3 and 47% from the field in general. Now, that also got him paid in a 4-year contract after the first year was last season. We'll show that in just a second, so stay tuned for that. But Cam is someone who is a really solid basketball player and can impact winning at a high level. And I do find it fascinating, by the way, and we love showing these shot charts for players that the Heat could potentially go after, whether it be in free agency or on the trade market. He is one of the most aggressive three-point shooters in the NBA. Honestly, we should show Duncan Robinson's shot chart in a future episode, and we will likely do that. But he is very similar to Duncan in where 90% of his shots come from beyond the arc. Like sometimes he'll leverage his three-point shooting into getting into the painted area and getting to the rim or out in transition or maybe a one-dribble pull-up. But you see it right there. Like it is very dark and very heavily populated behind that three-point arc, and then very little and light blue in the mid-range. He just doesn't do it often. He is what you call a three-point specialist like Duncan Robinson, which is why it's intriguing to even make him a trade target for Miami. Because, sure, Bleacher Report used that statistic of being 19th the NBA in three-pointers made last season, but it's like they already have 2 or 3 guys on this roster that are really made out to be a three-point shooter, and that be their main role. So that's the part that's a little intriguing to me, and I'm not so sure if he is the best fit unless you trade Duncan Robinson. Now, specifically looking at the three-point shooting for Cam Johnson, it's pretty clear that he's among the best in the NBA, right? You look at some of these league averages to his career and see how he stacks up. And like I said, this is career, so these league averages are ever since he entered the league after being a late lottery pick out of North Carolina. He's one of the most efficient three-point shooters in the NBA from the corner. 7% above league average from the right side and 3% from the left side. League average pretty much everywhere else, basically the same league average at top of the key. Slightly above 2% from the right wing and only 1% from the left wing. But you get the point. I don't need to show anymore. I don't need to talk about it. Don't need to convince you. He is one of the, if not top 10, three-point shooters in the NBA right now. We're going to continue the conversation here on Cam Johnson, but make sure you are subscribed to the channel because no matter when we are in the sports calendar, we are going to cover the Miami Heat on a daily basis. Hit that sub button. The goal is 14K subs before the season begins in mid-October. Think we should be able to do that just fine. Hit that sub button right now. All right, the issue with Cam Johnson, not from a player perspective, not how he fits with this roster, but it's actually his contract because he's getting paid a significant chunk of change. Like I mentioned, last season was the first year of a 4-year, $96 million deal he signed with the Brooklyn Nets after being dealt in that Kevin Durant deal. So he's got 3 years left on his contract, all at $20+ million, 22 and a half, 20 and a half, and then 22 and a half. Weird contract structure where it dips down in 25, 26, and then goes back up. No player options, fully guaranteed basically, and then will be an unrestricted free agent in 27, 28 when he's 31, 32 years old. And this contract, for someone who is as good as he is from three and equally solid defensively, in a vacuum actually works out pretty well, and I would be willing to pay him this much money. But we're going to deep dive into why this contract might be one of the more difficult things in terms of acquiring Cam Johnson for the Miami Heat. Before we do that, though, I want to make sure you're representing the Miami Heat every single day. It's still hot out in Miami. If you need some hat coverage of your face or just want to look cool representing the Heat, this hat does that just well. It's adjustable, two-tone cream and red color, 2 logos. I love it, and it's $8 off right now when you go to chatsports.com/Heat hat. We're going to put that link in the description and comments of today's video for all of you, but make sure you represent the Heat with this hat. All right. Let's go back to the contract because it's incredibly difficult to acquire for the Miami Heat. It's well documented that Miami is right up against that second apron. When I say right up, I mean right there. Like if they signed a vetman player on a vetman contract or a UDFA, it does not matter. If they filled the 15th roster spot that they have available with any type of player, they're going into the second apron. So that tells you that they can't really acquire any money in a trade unless they send out more money. And that's why this contract ends up being incredibly difficult. Because here's the thing. If you are trading for Cam Johnson, there is no world, in my opinion, to where you would want to have both Cam and Duncan on the same team. Now, maybe you can say, all right, we'll trade Tyler Hero for Cam Johnson because he fits this team better. We'll start Cam at the 2 or the 3 and trust that his lateral movement's good enough to be a 2 in the NBA, because I believe it actually could be. But more realistically here, the Heat aren't doing that. So if they were going to try to go out and acquire Cam, you would be trading Duncan Robinson because of his contract being $19.4 million this season. But also, they kind of do similar things in terms of how they move and how they space the floor on the court. And there isn't a lot of trades out there where Miami would be able to do this straight up. I played around on Fanspo, Spotrac, whatever service you like to play around on when it comes to trade simulations. And it's just very difficult for the Heat to do a one-on-one trade with the Brooklyn Nets because the Nets contracts in cap situation isn't the best either. So it's like Miami can't acquire any more money back. The Nets can't really acquire that much money in return either. So it's one of those things like, what do we do? Because Duncan makes $3 million less than Cam, and even when you throw in like a Josh Richardson contract or something like that, it doesn't equal Cam Johnson's cap hit for this upcoming year, which means the Heat can't take it back in. And then the next person they'd have to add is someone making $5-6 million for both of them to be good. And I'm not trading Duncan Robinson and Haywood Highsmith, or Duncan Robinson and I don't know, trying to think of another player on the team that makes $5 or $6 million that you can trade due to not being an early signing or a recent signing. Like, it just simply can't happen unless it's a 3-team deal. It's unfortunate for Miami, but it's simply the case. But you might be asking, would I even do a trade? Because I haven't really given you a full answer. I would do a Cam Johnson trade if it doesn't cost the Heat that much. Like, if they were able to somehow maneuver a 3-team deal where it works out financially, you're only trading Duncan Robinson in light draft capital. I'm not trading a first-round pick for Cam Johnson. I'm not doing it. So the only way that I would be willing to trade for Cam, and I would be willing to, is if it costs Duncan Robinson, maybe a handful of second-round picks, and whatever other salary-filling moves that need to be done to acquire him, because he is better defensively by quite a large stretch. So to me, it would be a better fit because he provides the same three-point shooting, but better defense with a slightly more contract cost if you're the Miami Heat. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Make sure you are following me over on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. We're talking about the Heat every single day. And if you want wall-to-wall coverage on the Miami Heat in between each video, my Twitter is the best place to do that. So go follow me right now.